Isabella moved through the busy city streets, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, holding the day's fresh produce. She was in her mid-20s, an artist trying to make it work in a world that didn't always value brushstrokes over corporate profits. Her apartment was small, her bank account often smaller, but her spirit wasn't. She held on to a strong moral compass, a quiet belief in doing good, even when it felt like the world was pushing back. The city was a blur of noise and hurried faces, but Isabella always found a pocket of calm within it, usually at the local soup kitchen. Every Tuesday and Thursday she traded her paintbrushes for serving spoons, her quiet studio for the bustling, warm kitchen of St. Jude's. It wasn't just about helping, it was about feeling connected, about giving back a little of the kindness she wished she saw more of in the world. Isabella moved with a natural grace, handing out bowls of hot stew, her smile genuine, her eyes meeting those of the people she served. She listened more than she spoke, offering a silent nod or a gentle word when someone needed it. Her compassion was clear, a steady flame that burned bright even on the coldest days. She saw the resilience in the faces around her, and it mirrored her own quiet fight. It was at St. Jude's that she first met Father Michael. He was a new addition, a man in his early 30s with kind eyes and a presence that seemed to calm the room. He wasn't loud or boisterous, but when he spoke, people listened. There was an aura about him, a quiet authority mixed with a deep, almost tangible empathy. He'd often sit with the older folks, listening patiently to their stories, offering a hand on a shoulder, a simple, comforting word. Isabella watched him, admiring his dedication. He seemed like the embodiment of what a priest should be, kind, understanding, and deeply committed to his faith and community. He was a rock in a sea of uncertainty for many who came through the doors of St. Jude's. Isabella found herself drawn to his calm demeanor. He had a way of looking at people, really seeing them. That was rare. His observations were often insightful, cutting through the noise to the heart of a matter. She saw him as a dedicated good man, someone who genuinely cared. She'd catch him sometimes, just watching the room, a thoughtful look on his face. She admired his quiet strength, the way he handled difficult situations with a gentle firmness. He was exactly what she imagined a priest would be, a pillar of the community offering solace and hope. But sometimes, just sometimes, a different flicker crossed his face. A fleeting glance, sharper, more intense than she expected from a man of the cloth. A guarded response when someone asked about his past. A slight hesitation before he offered a blessing. Or a moment of intense focus, his eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly, as if he were scanning for something, assessing a threat. It was subtle, almost too quick to notice, but Isabella, with her artist's eye for detail, caught these little shifts. They hinted at something more beneath the priestly facade, a hidden depth she couldn't quite place. It was like seeing a strong undercurrent beneath a calm river. These small observations only made her more curious. Isabella found herself increasingly intrigued by Father Michael, beyond his role as a priest. She respected him, yes, but there was a burgeoning curiosity that went deeper. She'd find herself watching him, not just because he was helping, but because there was something about him that didn't quite fit the picture. It wasn't a bad feeling, just an unshakable sense that there was more to him than met the eye, a complexity she couldn't yet define. One blustery Thursday, a pipe burst in the kitchen, sending water gushing across the floor. Panic started to spread among the volunteers and the people waiting for food. It was chaos. Father Michael, without a moment's hesitation, took charge. He didn't shout, but his voice cut through the noise, calm and clear. "Everyone, stay calm. Isabella, help me move the dry goods. Others, find buckets." He moved quickly, efficiently, directing people, his sleeves rolled up, getting soaked as he tried to stem the flow. Isabella worked alongside him, hauling heavy bags of flour and rice, their hands brushing as they coordinated movements. He made quick decisions, his movements precise and strong. He seemed to know exactly what to do, how to fix things, how to reassure everyone. They worked together, a silent understanding passing between them, until the main valve was shut off and the immediate crisis averted. The incident left Isabella with an unsettling yet compelling feeling. The way he had taken control, the raw capability she'd seen in his actions, it wasn't just priestly kindness. It was something else, something powerful. She felt an undeniable, unspoken connection with him in that moment, a shared intensity that stirred emotions she hadn't anticipated. It was a strange mix of admiration and something warmer, a feeling that both excited and unnerved her. She knew she shouldn't feel this way about a priest, but the connection was there, a quiet hum beneath the surface of her thoughts. Isabella went back to her usual routine after that, balancing her painting with her shifts at the soup kitchen. But Father Michael stayed in her thoughts. His image kept popping up in her mind, the calm priest, the decisive leader during the pipe burst. It was like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, a piece of art with a hidden layer. She found herself looking forward to her volunteer days, not just for the work, but for the chance to see him again, to observe him, to try and understand the silent signals she'd picked up. Then, things started to shift around the soup kitchen. At first, it was just little things, easy to ignore. Unfamiliar cars, expensive models she didn't usually see in that neighborhood, would sometimes be parked a block or two away, their occupants just sitting there, watching. Then, these unfamiliar faces started showing up closer. Men in dark suits, sometimes talking on their phones, sometimes just leaning against a wall, their eyes scanning the street. They didn't come inside the soup kitchen, but their presence was noticeable, a silent, unsettling addition to the usual crowd of people waiting for food. She'd hear hushed conversations sometimes, quick whispers exchanged between these new figures and some of the older, regular patrons. Conversations that stopped as soon as anyone got too close. It was all subtle, but it built up, making the air around the place feel a little heavier, a little less open. And Father Michael, he started having these absences. Not just short breaks, but he'd be gone for whole afternoons, sometimes even a full day. No explanation, just a quiet word to the head volunteer that he wouldn't be in. It wasn't like him. Usually, he was so dedicated, so reliable. These disappearances, combined with the strange new faces, started to make Isabella feel a slight unease. It wasn't suspicion yet, just a nagging feeling that something was off, that the quiet rhythm of the soup kitchen was changing. She started overhearing things too, little snippets of conversation from the community members, whispers about someone powerful in the area. They talked about a figure everyone respected but also feared. Someone who got things done, but in a way that wasn't always legal. They called him the Ghost sometimes, because he was rarely seen but his influence was everywhere. Other times, they just called him the Boss. It was always vague, never direct, just enough to paint a picture of a shadow looming over the neighborhood. Isabella tried not to pay too much attention, telling herself it was just local gossip. But the stories added to the strange atmosphere. One evening, after a particularly long shift at the soup kitchen, Isabella was walking home, the streetlights just starting to flicker on. She took a shortcut down a quieter side street, thinking about a new painting idea. As she rounded a corner, she stopped dead. There, under the dim light of a lamppost, was Father Michael. But he wasn't wearing his priest's collar, and he wasn't smiling. He was standing with a group of heavily built men, their postures stiff, their faces serious. Father Michael was speaking, his voice low but firm, his hand making a sharp gesture. His expression was stern, commanding, completely different from the gentle, empathetic look she was used to. It was a stark contrast to his priestly persona, like seeing a completely different person. He looked powerful, dangerous even, in a way she couldn't have imagined. Isabella quickly ducked behind a parked car, her heart pounding. She watched for a few more seconds, unseen. The men listened to him, nodding, not questioning. Then they dispersed, quickly melting into the shadows. Father Michael stood there for another moment, his gaze sweeping the street, before he too turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. She walked home in a daze. The image burned into her mind. The compassionate priest, the man who offered solace and hope, and the stern, commanding figure. How could they be the same person? Isabella struggled to reconcile the two images. Her perception of Father Michael became muddled, like a painting where the colors had run together. It didn't make sense. The kind, gentle priest she admired couldn't be this other person, this man who looked like he belonged in a different, much darker world. Her curiosity intensified, turning into a need for answers. She started subtly trying to learn more about him. She'd casually ask other volunteers if they knew anything about Father Michael's past, or where he went during his absences. They knew little, just that he was a good man, dedicated to the community. She watched his interactions more closely at the soup kitchen. He was still the same, kind and patient. But now she saw the guardedness, the subtle shifts she'd noticed before, in a new, more unsettling light. She looked for any sign, any crack in the facade that would explain what she had seen. One day, while helping to clean up, an older volunteer, Mrs. Rodriguez, a woman who had seen a lot in her life, paused beside Isabella. She didn't look at Isabella directly, but kept wiping down the counter. "Mija," she said softly, "this neighborhood, it has many shadows. Good people, bad people. Sometimes the lines get blurry. Just be careful who you get close to. Some people, they have a lot of weight on their shoulders, and sometimes that weight can crush you too." Mrs. Rodriguez gave Isabella a significant look, a look that spoke of unspoken knowledge and quiet warnings. "Some people," she continued, "they live double lives. For reasons you might not understand, it's best not to get involved in things that are too deep for you." Isabella felt a chill. Was Mrs. Rodriguez talking about Father Michael? Was this a subtle warning about him? The hints, the disappearances, the strange men, the rumors, and now this cryptic warning. It all started to coalesce into a disturbing picture. The peaceful community, the simple act of helping others, suddenly felt like it had a dangerous undercurrent, a hidden world lurking just beneath the surface. And Father Michael, the man she admired, the man she was increasingly drawn to, seemed to be at the very center of it. Isabella's growing unease became a constant companion. The subtle warnings from Mrs. Rodriguez, combined with her own unsettling observations, painted a picture of foreboding around Father Michael. She tried to dismiss it, to tell herself she was imagining things, but the image of him commanding those men, his stern face under the streetlights, kept replaying in her mind. It was a stark contrast to the kind priest she knew, and the dissonance was starting to wear on her. She found herself watching him more closely at the soup kitchen, trying to catch a glimpse of that other person, that powerful leader in his everyday actions. But he was always just Father Michael, gentle and empathetic, helping those in need. It was confusing, and it made her feel like she was losing her mind. One evening, after staying late at the soup kitchen to finish a mural she was painting on one of the walls, Isabella decided to take a shortcut through a less trafficked alleyway. It was a route she sometimes used, thinking it saved time, but tonight it felt different. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence heavier. As she walked, a sudden movement caught her eye. Two figures emerged from the darkness, blocking her path. They were rough-looking men, their faces obscured by hoodies. Isabella's heart leaped into her throat. Before she could react, one of them grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. "Give us what you got, pretty lady," he snarled, his breath smelling of stale cigarettes. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She struggled, trying to pull away, but his grip was like iron. Just as the second man reached for her bag, A voice, deep and resonant, cut through the night. "Let her go." It was Father Michael. He stepped out of the deeper shadows, his presence suddenly filling the narrow alley. He wasn't wearing his clerical collar, just a dark jacket, but there was an unmistakable authority in his stance. The two men hesitated, looking at each other, then at him. "Mind your own business, Father," the first man growled, tightening his grip on Isabella. In a blur of motion, Father Michael was there. His movements were swift, precise, and shockingly effective. He didn't just push the man. He disarmed him with a fluid twist of the wrist, sending the man stumbling back with a yelp of pain. The other attacker, momentarily stunned, lunged, but Michael met him with a calculated strike that sent him reeling into the brick wall. It wasn't the clumsy defensive moves of someone trying to avoid a fight. It was the practiced, confident action of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The two men, nursing their injuries and clearly surprised by the unexpected resistance, decided they'd picked the wrong target. They scrambled away, disappearing back into the darkness from which they came. Isabella stood there, trembling, her arm throbbing where she'd been grabbed. Father Michael turned to her, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Are you all right, Isabella?" he asked, his voice softer now, but with an underlying intensity she hadn't heard before. She could only nod, still too shaken to speak. His swift and decisive actions had left her deeply shaken, but also, surprisingly, deeply impressed. She had seen a raw power in him, a controlled force that completely contradicted his clerical image. It was terrifying, yet undeniably captivating. He reached out, gently taking her arm, his touch careful. "You're shaking," he observed, his thumb brushing over her skin. "Come, let me walk you home." As they walked, the silence between them was heavy, broken only by the distant city sounds. Isabella kept glancing at him, trying to reconcile the two Michaels. The protector, the fighter, the man who had effortlessly dispatched two attackers, and the gentle priest. When they reached her apartment building, he stopped at the entrance. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked again, his eyes searching hers. In that moment, for just a flicker, his guard seemed to drop. Isabella saw a weariness in his eyes, a flicker of something ancient and regretful, a hint of the burden Mrs. Rodriguez had spoken about. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but she saw it. It was a moment of vulnerability, raw and unexpected. Compelled by an instinct she couldn't ignore, Isabella took a deep breath. "Father Michael," she began, her voice a little shaky but firm. "Who are you, really?" She looked directly into his eyes, trying to convey the depth of her confusion, her need for answers. "What was that? How did you do that?" He didn't flinch. He looked away for a moment, his gaze fixed on some point in the distance, then back at her. His expression was once again carefully neutral. "Isabella," he said, his voice low, "there are things in this world, things that require a certain kind of knowledge, a certain kind of action to keep the peace even in places like this." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My past is complicated. There are choices I've made, paths I've walked, long before I ever put on this collar. Some things, they stay with you, no matter how much you try to change." He offered a small, almost sad smile. "I try to use those skills for good now, to protect those who cannot protect themselves." His answers were vague yet thoughtful, hinting at a complex past and difficult choices, but revealing no concrete details. He gave her just enough to make her understand there was more, but not enough to truly know. Despite his evasiveness, Isabella found herself increasingly drawn to the enigmatic man standing before her. The danger surrounding him, the mystery of his double life only intensified her fascination. It was illogical, perhaps even dangerous, but she couldn't deny the pull. The experience in the alley, his swift intervention, and her direct question had created a new kind of bond between them. It was a shared secret, a moment of raw truth that pulled them closer, even as it raised more questions than answers. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that her world had just become a lot more complicated. And she knew that, for better or worse, she wanted to understand more about the man known as Father Michael. The encounter in the alley had changed everything. Isabella's world, once neatly divided into her art, her volunteer work, and her quiet life, now felt as if a fault line had opened beneath it. The subtle hints she'd noticed before, the expensive cars, the hushed conversations, the strange men, all began to coalesce into something more concrete, more menacing. It was no longer just a feeling, but a growing sense of unease that the criminal underworld wasn't just lurking in the shadows, it was actively encroaching. Her small, safe community, especially the soup kitchen, felt increasingly vulnerable. One afternoon, a young man who often helped out at the soup kitchen, a quiet kid named Leo, didn't show up for his shift. Isabella didn't think much of it at first. People missed shifts all the time. But then, a few days later, she heard whispers. Leo had apparently gotten into trouble, involved with some bad people. The details were vague, but the fear in the voices of the other volunteers was not. It felt like a direct consequence of the escalating tensions she'd been sensing. This wasn't some abstract danger. It was affecting people she knew, people she cared about. Michael, or Father Michael, as she still instinctively called him, seemed to sense her growing worry. His presence at the soup kitchen became more pronounced, his movements more deliberate. He spent less time counseling and more time observing, his eyes constantly scanning, assessing. His protective instincts, which she had witnessed firsthand in the alley, were now almost palpable. He would subtly position himself between Isabella and any unfamiliar faces, his posture stiff, his gaze sharp. He wasn't just a priest offering comfort anymore. He was a sentinel. The shift in his demeanor became undeniable one evening, when a group of men, clearly not regulars, walked into the soup kitchen. They were loud, aggressive, and their eyes seemed to be searching for something, or someone. Isabella felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Before she could react, Michael moved. It wasn't a rush, but a smooth, fluid motion that put him directly in their path. He spoke to them in a low, firm voice, his words too quiet for Isabella to hear. But his tone left no room for argument. The men hesitated, exchanged uneasy glances, and then, surprisingly, backed down and left. The air in the soup kitchen seemed to hold its breath until they were gone. Michael turned back, a calm expression on his face as if he had simply redirected a lost tourist. But Isabella had seen the flicker in his eyes, the subtle tension in his jaw. This was not the gentle priest she knew. This was something else entirely. His methods were becoming less subtle, more forceful, and it was clear he was no longer just trying to maintain an illusion. He was protecting them, actively. The final straw came a week later. Isabella was walking home after a late shift at her studio, the city lights blurring around her. She took a shortcut through a less trafficked alley, a route she usually avoided but was in a hurry. As she rounded a corner, she froze. Ahead, under the dim glow of a single street lamp, was Michael. But he wasn't alone. He was facing off against a group of 4 men, their faces hard, their stances aggressive. One of them held a pipe. "You think you can just waltz into our territory, Michael?" One of the men snarled, his voice echoing off the brick walls. "You think your little church disguise makes you invisible?" Michael stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides. He wasn't wearing his clerical collar. He was in a dark, well-cut suit, and his face was a mask of cold fury. "This isn't your territory, Marco," Michael replied, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you know, I don't hide." Isabella felt a cold dread wash over her. This was it, the full-blown confrontation. She shrank back into the shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs. She couldn't move. couldn't breathe. She watched as one of the men lunged forward with the pipe. Michael moved with an almost unbelievable speed, a blur of motion. There was a sickening crack, a grunt of pain, and the man with the pipe was on the ground, clutching his arm. The other three hesitated, their bravado faltering. Michael didn't miss a beat. He stepped forward, his eyes like steel, and spoke, his voice no longer quiet but low and commanding, filled with an authority that sent shivers down Isabella's spine. "Tell your boss I'm done playing games. This neighborhood is under my protection. Anyone who causes trouble here will answer to me. And you," he looked directly at Marco, "you tell him that if Leo isn't back by morning, unharmed, I will personally pull him out of whatever hole he's hiding in." The men, clearly terrified, scrambled away, leaving their injured companion moaning on the ground. Michael watched them go, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. The priest persona had completely shattered, revealing a man of immense, terrifying power. He turned, his gaze sweeping the alley, and his eyes locked onto Isabella's hiding spot. For a moment, she thought he would be angry, or perhaps even more dangerous. But then, the sternness in his face softened, replaced by a look of profound regret and weariness. He walked towards her, his steps measured. "Isabella," he said, his voice now devoid of its earlier edge, almost gentle. "You shouldn't be here." She couldn't speak. She just stared at him, her mind reeling. The words from the man, "our territory," "church disguise," "Leo," all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. He reached for her hand, his touch surprisingly tender. "Come with me," he urged, his voice low. He led her away from the alley, through a maze of back streets, until they reached a nondescript door. He unlocked it, ushered her inside, and then locked it behind them. It was a small, sparsely furnished apartment, nothing like she would have imagined. He turned to face her, his shoulders slumped. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of deep exhaustion. He took a deep breath, looking at her with eyes that held a lifetime of burdens. "My name is Michael," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not Father Michael. I am a high-ranking figure in what people call the local Mafia. I run things around here. I took over after my father was killed. It was never a choice I wanted, but it was my family's legacy, and I had to protect it, protect the people who depended on us." Isabella felt a cold shock, a wave of nausea. A Mafia boss. The man she had admired, the man she felt a connection with, was a dangerous criminal. The priest, the gentle soul, was a carefully constructed lie. "The soup kitchen," he continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. "The disguise. It was a way to keep an eye on things, to understand what was happening on the streets without drawing too much attention, and to try and do some good, to atone for the things I have to do, the life I lead, to protect this community from others like Marco, who would tear it apart." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, full of a raw, painful honesty. "I never meant for you to get involved, Isabella. I never meant for you to know." He walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. "You are in profound danger by knowing this, Isabella. My world is not safe. It's violent. It's unforgiving. You need to stay away from me. For your own safety, you need to forget everything you've seen tonight, everything you know about me." Isabella's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, fear, yes, but beneath it all, a deep, aching sense of betrayal. The man she thought she knew was gone, replaced by this ruthless, powerful figure. Yet, even as fear gnawed at her, a strange, undeniable pull remained. The intensity of his gaze, the raw vulnerability in his confession, the sheer force of his protective instincts, it was all still there. The terrifying truth of who he was didn't erase the dangerous attraction she felt. It amplified it. She was grappling with the moral implications of her feelings for a man leading a life of crime, a life that had just crashed headfirst into hers. Isabella stood there, frozen, the weight of Michael's words pressing down on her. Her world, which had felt so clear and orderly just hours before, was now a chaotic mess of shadows and hidden truths. The kind, gentle priest was a facade, a carefully crafted illusion. The man standing before her, eyes pleading for her understanding yet demanding her distance, was a Mafia boss. The sheer audacity of it, the deception, should have fueled a burning anger, a desire to run as far and as fast as she could. But instead, a different, more complex set of emotions churned within her. The betrayal was sharp, yes, a stinging wound to her trust. Yet, intertwined with that pain was a persistent, unsettling pull. She looked at Michael, truly looked at him, and saw not just a criminal, but a man burdened by an impossible life. His confession, delivered with such raw honesty, had cracked open a window into his soul, revealing a vulnerability she hadn't expected. He was trying to push her away, to protect her, but every word he uttered, every flicker of pain in his eyes, only seemed to draw her deeper into his dangerous orbit. His world was violent, he said, unforgiving, and she believed him. But she couldn't just walk away, not yet. Her mind replayed his actions at the alley, the swift, brutal efficiency with which he had handled the threat. This wasn't just a man in a role. This was who he was, forged by fire and necessity. Michael, seeing the mix of fear and something else, something he couldn't quite decipher, in her eyes, took a step back. He had laid bare his darkest secret, and now he waited for the inevitable rejection. He expected her to scream, to cry, to demand to be let go. But she did none of these things. She simply stood there, a silent storm brewing within her. He knew he had to make her understand the gravity of her situation. "Isabella," he said again, his voice firm, "you don't understand. My life is not about choices. It's about survival. For me, for my family, for the people who depend on my protection. Staying close to me will only put a target on your back. It's not a risk you should take." But Isabella, stubborn and fiercely independent, found herself resisting his logic. The more he tried to push her away, the more her resolve hardened. She wasn't naive. She understood the danger. Yet, a part of her, the artistic, curious part, yearned to understand the man behind the myth. She wanted to peel back the layers, to see the good she still believed existed within him, despite the darkness. She saw the soup kitchen not as a simple disguise, but as a genuine attempt at atonement, a desperate grab for a sliver of normalcy and kindness in a brutal existence. She wouldn't let go so easily. In the days that followed, Michael tried to distance himself. He avoided the soup kitchen, stopped answering her calls, even had his men subtly redirect her if she tried to find him. But Isabella was persistent. She found ways to be where he might be, to catch glimpses of him. She saw him in a different light now, not as the gentle priest, but as the powerful figure he truly was. She saw him command respect, sometimes fear, from the men around him. She saw the intricate web of his organization, the unspoken rules, the fierce loyalty that bound them together. One evening, she followed a hunch and found herself near a warehouse district. She saw Michael enter a dimly lit building surrounded by his usual entourage. Curiosity overriding caution, she found a discreet vantage point. Through a grimy window, she watched him. He was meeting with other men. Discussions were intense, hands gesturing, voices low but firm. She expected to see only ruthlessness, only the cold calculations of a criminal enterprise. But then, a man, one of Michael's enforcers, approached him with a problem. His daughter was sick, needed an expensive operation. Michael listened, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. He didn't hesitate. He simply nodded, made a quick call, and then handed the man a thick envelope, his words quiet but firm. "Get your daughter what she needs. No questions asked." Isabella watched, stunned. This was the human side of the Mafia, a side she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about power and control. It was about a strange, twisted sense of loyalty, of looking after one's own. It blurred the lines of good and evil even further. Michael, the ruthless boss, was also the protector, the provider. It made her feelings for him even more complicated, more profound. Later that week, she managed to corner him. He was tired, his guard down. She didn't press him about the warehouse. Instead, she just looked at him, her gaze soft, understanding. He sighed, running a hand over his face. "It's a heavy crown, Isabella," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "This life. Every decision, every move has consequences for me, for everyone around me. Sometimes I just want to walk away, to be someone else. But I can't. Not yet." It was a rare moment of shared vulnerability, a crack in his hardened exterior. He spoke of the constant pressure, the sacrifices, the longing for a life he could never have. He spoke of his father, of the legacy he was forced to uphold, of protecting his community from even worse elements. In that moment, Isabella saw past the Mafia boss, past the priest. She saw Michael, a man trapped by circumstance struggling with the burden of his existence. Their fragile connection, however, was about to be tested. The whispers on the street had grown louder, more urgent. A rival faction, led by a ruthless man named Valenti, was making aggressive moves, encroaching on Michael's territory, threatening his operations, and more importantly, the peace he had carefully maintained. Law enforcement, too, seemed to be closing in, their presence more noticeable, their investigations more pointed. Michael's world, already precarious, was becoming a powder keg. Isabella, by her sheer proximity to him, was now inadvertently caught in the crossfire. The stakes had just increased dramatically, forcing them both to rely on each other in ways neither had anticipated. Isabella now faced a profound moral dilemma. Could she truly love a man who was a criminal? And could she truly believe in his capacity for redemption, knowing the terrifying world they were both now part of? The danger was no longer a distant hum. It was a screeching siren, growing louder with every passing day. Isabella felt it in the tightening of her chest, in Michael's increasingly strained expressions, in the way his men moved with a new sense of urgency. Her association with him, once a quiet secret, now felt like a neon sign flashing above her head. Valenti's moves were becoming bolder, more personal. A small gallery where Isabella had displayed some of her art was vandalized, a clear message left spray-painted on the shattered window. "Stay away from what's not yours." The threat was unmistakable. This wasn't just about territory anymore, it was about her. Michael, when he saw the damage, became a different man. His usual controlled demeanor shattered, replaced by a raw, guttural fury Isabella had never witnessed. His eyes, usually deep and thoughtful, burned with an inferno. He didn't speak much, but his actions were loud. He moved like a predator, his every muscle coiled, ready to strike. He doubled her security, assigning 2 of his most trusted men to shadow her relentlessly. He brought her to a new, more secure apartment, a fortress compared to her old place, and insisted she stay there, under constant watch. "Don't touch me like that," she remembered him growling at one of Valenti's men who had dared to grab her arm during an earlier, smaller incident. Now, that possessive protectiveness had amplified tenfold. It was terrifying, yet, disturbingly, it also made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt before. She was his, and he would move heaven and earth to keep her out of harm's way. Isabella, however, was done being a damsel in distress. The vandalism at the gallery, the blatant attack on her personal space, ignited a fire within her. She wasn't just Michael's girlfriend. She was a woman with her own will, her own intelligence. She started paying closer attention to the scraps of information Michael's men would inadvertently drop, to the maps and documents Michael would sometimes leave on his desk. She listened to the coded conversations, piecing together fragments of the complex puzzle that was his world. "I can help," she told him one night, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. He looked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "This isn't your fight, Isabella." "It is now," she countered, pointing to a small bruise on her arm, a lingering reminder from the gallery incident. "They made it my fight." Seeing her resolve, Michael slowly began to open up, revealing more of his long-term plan. It wasn't just about fighting Valenti, it was about getting out. He spoke of a carefully constructed exit strategy, years in the making, designed to dismantle his organization from within, to sever the roots that bound him to this life. He had been slowly diverting funds, building legitimate businesses under hidden fronts, preparing for a clean break. Valenti's sudden aggression had accelerated his timeline, forcing his hand sooner than he had planned. He needed to consolidate power, eliminate the immediate threat, and then vanish, taking Isabella with him. The shared danger, the constant proximity, the weight of their precarious situation forged an intense, almost primal bond between them. There were moments, brief and stolen amidst the chaos, when they would collapse into each other, finding solace and passion in the eye of the storm. A stolen kiss in a hidden corner, the touch of his hand on her cheek as he whispered words of reassurance, the fierce embrace that promised a future they both desperately craved. These were not moments of gentle romance, but raw, urgent expressions of connection, fueled by adrenaline and the terrifying knowledge that each moment could be their last. The intimacy wasn't just physical, it was a profound merging of their spirits, two souls fighting for survival, for a chance at a life together. Michael laid out the immense sacrifices required for their freedom. He would have to give up everything he had built, shed his identity, disappear from the face of the earth, at least as the Mafia boss. It meant leaving behind loyal men, dismantling a network, and facing down enemies who would stop at nothing to prevent him from escaping their grasp. The price of freedom was steep, paid in blood and secrets, in years of careful planning and dangerous maneuvers. He looked at her, his eyes pleading for her understanding, for her to truly grasp the enormity of what he was asking. "Are you sure, Isabella?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Once we step onto this path, there's no turning back. It's all or nothing." Isabella, despite the fear that gnawed at her, looked back at him with unwavering eyes. She was no longer the innocent artist who had first met Father Michael. She had seen the darkness, the violence, the ruthless calculations. But she had also seen the man beneath the facade, the man burdened by his past, desperate for a future. She believed in his potential for redemption, and more importantly, she believed in them. "I'm with you," she said, her voice clear and strong, "all the way." It was a conscious decision, a leap of faith into an abyss, but she would rather face that abyss with Michael than live a safe, empty life without him. Amidst the chaos and the constant threat, they found a brief, fragile glimpse of hope. One evening, after a particularly tense day of planning and near misses, they sat by a window overlooking the city lights. Michael held her hand, tracing patterns on her skin. "Imagine," he murmured, his voice soft, "a small house by the ocean. No one knows our names, just us, and the sound of the waves." Isabella leaned her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. She could almost feel the ocean breeze, almost taste the salt in the air. It was a powerful image, a beacon in the storm, reinforcing the dangerous romance that had blossomed between them. It was a future they would fight for, a future free from the shadows, a new horizon for their impossible love. The time for planning was over. Michael was ready for the final confrontation, a brutal, calculated move to dismantle the structures that had held him captive for so long. He wasn't just fighting a rival faction, he was fighting the very essence of his past, aiming to burn it all down so a new life could rise from the ashes. He moved with a cold precision Isabella had only glimpsed before, his eyes sharp, his commands crisp and unquestioned by the men around him. Isabella, far from being a bystander, found herself playing a critical, unexpected role. Michael needed eyes and ears in places his men couldn't go without drawing immediate suspicion. Her artistic background, her ability to blend into different social strata became an invaluable asset. She wasn't carrying a gun or throwing punches, but she was observing, listening, and transmitting vital information that shifted the tide of their covert war. One night, she had to sketch a seemingly innocent landscape from a rooftop across the city, her charcoal lines secretly marking the movements of a rival capo. Another time, she posed as a wealthy art buyer, gaining access to a high-security auction where a crucial piece of encrypted data was hidden in plain sight, disguised as a rare artifact. She felt the constant thrum of danger, a fear that was both exhilarating and terrifying, but she never faltered. She was fighting for their future, for the dream of the small house by the ocean. The plan unfolded with a brutal efficiency, but not without its share of unforeseen complications. Betrayals sprang from unexpected corners, testing Michael's resolve and forcing him to make split-second decisions that had life-or-death consequences. They faced ambushes in dimly lit warehouses, car chases through narrow city streets, and tense standoffs in opulent hidden rooms. Each step was a gamble, each victory hard-won. There were moments of intense peril where Isabella thought it was all over, moments where Michael's face, usually so composed, showed a flicker of raw desperation. One particular night, a supposed ally turned on them, leading to a fierce shootout. Isabella, hidden in a utility closet, listened to the gunfire, her heart hammering against her ribs, convinced Michael was gone. When he finally pulled her out, covered in grime and a trickle of blood from a graze on his arm, the relief that flooded her was so intense it almost buckled her knees. In the heat of this relentless conflict, Michael's true nature was laid bare. He was, without a doubt, the ruthless Mafia boss she had been warned about. He made difficult calls, gave orders that led to violence, and showed no mercy to those who threatened his objective, or, more importantly, Isabella. But alongside this chilling efficiency, she also saw his unwavering loyalty to his few trusted men, his strategic brilliance, and, most profoundly, his core humanity. He protected his people, those who were genuinely loyal, with a fierce devotion. He mourned the loss of a young man under his command, his face a mask of grief for a moment before he hardened it again. He never lost sight of his end goal, to break free, not just for himself, but for them. The confrontation was, in the end, successful. Michael systematically dismantled the rival faction, cutting off their supply lines, exposing their weaknesses, and neutralizing their leaders. He also severed his own ties, orchestrating a series of events that made it appear as though his organization had collapsed, leaving a void that would take years to fill. But the victory was costly. Several of his loyal men were lost, and the city's criminal landscape was left scarred, a testament to the brutal power vacuum that had been created. The path to freedom was indeed paved with difficult choices, and Michael had made every single one of them. As the dust settled, the immediate consequences began to sink in. They were free, yes, but the cost was heavy. Michael had to disappear completely, shedding every last vestige of his former identity. Isabella, too, had to sever ties with her old life, her art gallery, her friends, her apartment. They couldn't leave any trace that could lead someone back to them. The city, once a place of bustling energy and creative inspiration, now felt like a cage they had barely escaped. They moved from safe house to safe house, constantly looking over their shoulders, the phantom echoes of gunfire still ringing in their ears. Both Michael and Isabella bore the emotional and physical scars of their fight. Michael moved with a slight limp from a bullet graze, and his eyes, though softer when they looked at Isabella, still held a haunted quality, the weight of the lives he had taken and the decisions he had made. Isabella found herself flinching at loud noises, her sleep often disturbed by nightmares of the violence she had witnessed. They were forever changed, their innocence long gone, replaced by a hardened resilience and a profound understanding of the darkness that existed in the world. Yet, despite everything, they stood at the precipice of a new, uncertain future. They had broken free from the past, from the chains of Michael's criminal life. The city, now a place they had to leave behind, held no more power over them. They had each other, and that was enough. The dream of the small house by the ocean, once a faint whisper, now felt like a tangible destination. They had fought through hell to get there, and the journey had forged an unbreakable bond between them. They faced the challenge of building a life together from scratch, in a world that didn't know their names, a world where they could finally be just Michael and Isabella. Life after the Mafia was a slow, deliberate relearning of normalcy. Michael and Isabella found their small house by the ocean, just as they had dreamed. It wasn't fancy, just a simple place with a porch that overlooked the endless blue water. The quiet was almost deafening at first, a stark contrast to the constant hum of danger they had lived with for so long. Michael, whose days had once been filled with strategic moves and tense negotiations, now spent hours just watching the waves, letting the rhythm of the ocean wash over him. Isabella, too, found herself adapting to a slower pace, the adrenaline slowly draining from her system. Healing and trust became their daily work. The lingering trauma surfaced in unexpected ways. A sudden car backfiring would send a jolt through Michael, his hand instinctively going to where a weapon used to be. Isabella would sometimes wake in a cold sweat, reliving the fear of those final days. They talked, openly and honestly, about the emotional baggage. Michael spoke of the faces he couldn't forget, the decisions that still haunted him. Isabella shared her own fears, the feeling of being pulled into a world she never knew existed. They learned to lean on each other, offering comfort and understanding without judgment. It was a slow process, but with each shared memory, each quiet moment of support, their trust deepened, becoming an unbreakable foundation. Finding purpose was another challenge. Michael, with his sharp mind and natural leadership, couldn't simply sit idle. He started volunteering at a local marine conservation group, using his organizational skills to coordinate beach cleanups and raise awareness about ocean pollution. He never spoke of his past, but the drive and efficiency he brought to the group were undeniable. People respected him, drawn to his quiet strength. He found a strange kind of redemption in protecting something beautiful and fragile, a stark contrast to the destruction he had once been a part of. It was a way to channel his considerable talents for good, proving that even a man from his past could contribute meaningfully. Isabella's art, once a personal passion, now flourished with a new depth and intensity. The colors she used were bolder, the lines more expressive. Her experiences, the darkness and the light, the fear and the love, poured onto her canvases. She painted the raw power of the ocean, the resilience of life, and sometimes the quiet strength she saw in Michael's eyes. Her work became a powerful story of resilience and redemption, attracting attention from local galleries. She started exhibiting, her art resonating with people who saw something raw and honest in her pieces. It was a way for her to process everything, to transform the pain into beauty, and to tell a story that was uniquely hers. But the past wasn't entirely gone. Occasional reminders surfaced, testing their resolve. A news report about a former associate being arrested, a car that looked too familiar driving through their quiet town, a fleeting shadow that made Michael tense up. Each time they faced it together, Michael would reassure Isabella, his hand finding hers. They learned to recognize the triggers, to talk through the fear and to reinforce their commitment to their new life. These echoes of the past, though unsettling, only served to strengthen their bond, proving that their peace was hard-won and worth fighting for. They found a quiet peace, a hard-won serenity that came from overcoming immense challenges and choosing a path of love and honesty. Their days were filled with simple pleasures, long walks on the beach, cooking together, reading quietly on the porch as the sun set. Michael learned to smile more, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. Isabella felt a sense of calm she had never known before, a feeling of safety and belonging with him. It wasn't a life of grand gestures or constant excitement, but it was real, authentic, and deeply fulfilling. Their dangerous romance had transformed into a deep, enduring love, forged in fire and rooted in mutual respect and understanding. They had seen each other at their worst, in moments of raw fear and ruthless action, and still chose to love. Michael loved Isabella for her unwavering spirit, her compassion, and her ability to see the good in him when he doubted it himself. Isabella loved Michael for his strength, his loyalty, and the quiet kindness that lay beneath his formidable exterior. Their love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of choice, and to the belief that people can change. As they stood on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, they looked towards a new horizon. The future was unwritten, but it was theirs to shape, together. They had found redemption, not just for Michael, but for the complex, dangerous love they shared. It proved that even the darkest past could lead to a brighter future, a future built on honesty, peace, and the enduring power of two souls who chose to heal and love against all odds. Their story was a quiet triumph, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most profound changes happen in the calm after the storm.